Shalom, this is Eitan Shishkov speaking to you from Kiryat Yam in Israel, where the Tents of Mercy operate, both bringing humanitarian aid and establishing Messianic congregations. And I want to speak to you today in a progression of the messages that I have been giving. Those messages have spoken about crossing over into the next season of life. I've spoken about the home stretch, and today I'm going to call this message "Sent," and the concept of being sent by God. Let me begin with a little anecdote. Before my family and I moved to Israel back at the beginning of the 90s, I made a trip here, kind of a scouting trip, if you will. And just came by myself without the family. It happened to be winter. And I remember standing on a street corner in Haifa and just looking around and realizing that I really wasn't familiar with the signage was all in Hebrew. When people were walking past, they were speaking Hebrew. I had learned a little bit, but really couldn't understand people in conversation. Couldn't read the signs, felt pretty much alone. And then during the few weeks that I was here, I happened to stay in a little room, and this room was not exactly a hotel room, and it was unheated. There was a space heater there, but it was as cold as could be, and it was one of those seasons that can happen in Haifa where there's a great deal of rain, and it's just as if the moisture and the cool air kind of gets inside of you, and I was faced with the reality of not the romantic image of Israel, not the idealistic concept of coming back to the land and being a new immigrant and making my way and so forth, but it was really kind of the harsh reality. And so with that anecdote, we can turn to Numbers 13 and perhaps identify a little bit more with the spies who found the obstacles greater than what they wanted to face. Of course, in Numbers 13 is the beginning of a Torah portion that's called Shlach, send, where God says to Moses, "Send men out to spy the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the children of Israel." And he tells them to take one leader from each tribe, names the tribe, and the Lord sends them out to do this spying. And he says, "Go up," in verse 17, "and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many. And what's the land like? Is it good or bad? What are their cities like? Is the land rich or poor? But be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land." And then it adds parenthetically, now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. And of course we know that the spies went out, all 12 of them, and they came back sometime later. And the spies said in verse 27, "We went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit." They presented a great big bunch of fruit. "Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak," in other words, the giants. And so most of them responded out of this intimidation that came from looking at the circumstances. The scripture says that if our hearts faint in times of adversity, how little is our strength. That's from Proverbs 24. We know that world events are not exactly controllable, right? I mean, we can't dictate when and where there's going to be peace or war. Just in the year 2006, here 7 years ago, we experienced thousands of rockets being sent into our area, and personally, I had no way of stopping that. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't want it, but it was happening. And you have to make a decision then. So, am I going to live with this? Is this acceptable? Is this part of the circumstances of life, or find another address? And I believe that God is calling us to stand fast, and not just those of us that live in Israel, but wherever you are when you're watching. And so I want to delve into this a little bit and see what it's about to be sent. What to the faithful spies, Joshua and Caleb, what did they reflect about their approach? And I think it's interesting that in verse 30, Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once to take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." So there was a confidence that this man conveyed that was a result of God having promised, "Let's take possession, for we're able to overcome it." It flowed from the fact that God had called them to do something, and of course, this is a great source. This is where it comes from. And then in chapter 14, we see Joshua's response when the whole congregation lifts up their voices and cries and weeps and complains and says, "Oh, we wish we could go back to Egypt, and why did God bring us here?" And then Joshua in verse 6, Joshua and Caleb tore their clothes. Why do you think they tore their clothes? Looks to me like they were crying out to God and repenting and saying, "Oh Lord, don't hold this against the people." And they spoke to everybody and said, "Wait a minute, the land we passed through is a good land, and if the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give us a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land." So there's a very striking difference in the response of these groups. And I want to kind of bottom line it here just by giving a few tips of how to build confidence toward this reality of being sent. Of course, the first thing is just to recognize that we are sent. But we'll come back to that in just a moment. The first thing is we have to know him. And I love this in chapter 12 of the book of Numbers. You look at verses 7 and 8. It says, "Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly and not in dark sayings, and he sees the form of the Lord." So there's a face-to-face knowledge of God, which is what makes it possible to move forward into the territory that God is calling us to enter into and to be sent into that territory. And then, as we already read in chapter 14, verses 17 and following, "Now I pray, let the power of the Lord be great. The Lord is long-suffering and abundant in mercy, forever, forgiving iniquity and transgression. But he by no means clears the guilty." This is an intimate knowledge of God. It's the knowledge of God's power, his greatness, his long-suffering, his mercy, his forgiveness. And this is an absolute requirement. Caleb, in verse 24, it says, "My servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully," God is saying, "I will bring into this land where he went, and his descendants will inherit it." So the element of intimately knowing God, knowing his character, knowing how God will respond in situations, of course it comes from reading and rereading and meditating on and praying through the scriptures. But these things are given to us for our example. And all the way over in Philippians in the New Covenant, this concept is echoed in chapter 3 from verse 7 and on. "What things were gained to me I've counted loss for Messiah. In fact, I've counted all things loss for the excellence of the knowledge of Messiah, Yeshua my Lord, for whom I've suffered the loss of all things. I want to be found in him, not having my own righteousness, which is through the law, but that which is faith in the Messiah, that I may know him." This is the prayer of the apostle from prison, in a situation where he's speaking of the most important things, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death, that if by any means I may attain from the resurrection of the dead. So to know him. The second thing is following his voice in total surrender. We see this in Caleb. We already read the verses in which Caleb is determined to follow the Lord. He says, we can take possession, we can overcome it. Interestingly, Caleb is not from the tribes of Israel. Caleb is a Kenite. He was actually a Gentile. And of course, Joshua, son of Nun, is from the tribes of Israel and a Jew. And so here you have a Jew and a Gentile who are taking hold by faith of the promises of God, regardless of the obstacles. I love it. I really, really love that this was pointed out to me. And then you see that by following his voice in total surrender. Here's a statement of God that happened in regard to Saul's rebellion. The prophet Samuel said, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord?" This is 1 Samuel 15:22. "Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed or to listen than the fat of lambs." The concept here being the centrality of listening, of hearing, and of obeying the voice of God, following his voice in total surrender. Isaiah, when he saw the Lord high and lifted up in chapter 6, said, "Hineni, here I am." He saw the Lord high and lifted up. He was presented with the revelatory presence of God and surrendered on the spot. Esther, when she realized the situation, said, "Okay, I will do whatever it takes, and if I perish, I perish." This concept of yielding to the full will of God is so essential to the one who is sent. John chapter 20, verse 21, "As the Father has sent me, so I send you." Yeshua is speaking to the disciples. And when we turn to the book of John, the Gospel of John, there are so many times where the word sent or sending or send, all of these related words are used tens of times. And I just want to read to you one portion here from chapter 5. It's just so instructive to me. Beginning with verse 19. "Yeshua answered and said to them, 'Most assuredly I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do. For whatever he does, the Son also does in like manner.'" And he talks about the Father showing the Son and giving the Son life. Verse 23, "That all should honor the Son just as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him." And then on into verse 30, "I can do nothing of myself. As I hear, I judge. My judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me." And on and on. Verse 43 again, "I have not come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you will not receive him." Excuse me. We do not come in our own name. I'm not sending myself. I've been sent. I'm serving another. I'm serving the will of another. And sometimes this is hard for us to really integrate into our lives because we have iPhones and computers and iPads and some of us automobiles and all kinds of means at our disposal for entertainment. Even people without a great deal of money are using these things now. And so what does it say? It says that there's an illusion of being independent. There's an illusion of just choosing willy-nilly how to expend our time. But the fact is that we're sent. The fact is that we are not our own. We were bought with a price. And then finally, forging new territory. This pioneer spirit, which I'm so enthused about. I feel that it's really critical. And I love that somebody showed me that the name Kalev could be interpreted Kelev, as God's heart. And he said, and we quoted, that Kalev had a different spirit. In Joshua, there's a statement that is made when they're getting ready to go in. You've never been this way before. Now, this concept of being sent, it somehow alters the scariness of not knowing the future. If I'm sent, then I'm answerable to another, and because that one who has sent me is all-knowing, he knows what's in the future. He knows what I'm going to need. He can guide me. He can protect me. And if in the end I wind up losing my life, well, it's to his glory, and I will trust him to bring that about in a way that best glorifies him. Let's just finish this session with a quote from the book of Isaiah. Isaiah says to Israel, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name, you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I'll be with you, and through the rivers they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flame scorch you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior." May this come as a deep knowledge revealed by the Spirit of God, that you are sent, we have been sent, and therefore we can be strengthened by knowing him, by following his voice in total surrender, and by forging new territory that he causes us to enter into.